This session is finding your way around the Folio community. And I can tell that this may have been a quiet time for some other presentations because I know there's a lot of people that have been in Folio for a long time in this room and you know how to get your way around Folio. So, but thank you for coming to my session, our session. So for me, as a way of sort of describing part of my approach, which is to know the people that know where the bodies are buried in Folio. I might be one of those people. So in my day job, I'm the managing director at Index Data. And Index Data is a small company. You'll see a little bit of our history here. We were involved in the creation of Folio. We spend about probably 70% of our business and our time is on Folio, maybe 60%. Then another large percentage is on reshare. So I spend a lot of my personal time thinking about, talking about, and worrying about Folio. Within the Folio community, I have been the chair of the Tech Council since it's from its formation in 2018 until 2021, when we adopted a new governance model in Folio. I was the initial community council chair for that first year. And then subsequent to that, I've been co-chair with Simeon Warner. I've been in what was called originally there wasn't a name for it, but then it was called the Capacity Planning Group, and then transitioned to the Release Management Stakeholder. So I've been in that group. That group is the group that talks about when we should release software, and should we try to have 3 releases or 4 releases a year? And lately, it's sort of, does this particular bug fix rate, is it severe enough that we should put it into approve it for a critical service patch and that kind of stuff. So that's what that group, I've been involved in that for a long time. I was also part of the 5 or 7 people that developed the new governance model. That's not new anymore, but the governance model that we adopted in 2021. So I've been around for a while. Please contact me whenever about anything. I have, like I said, I have good insight into what has happened in Folio and maybe even why it happened, and certainly who was involved. And so that's part of finding your way around Folio. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Folio and its history and the relationship with the Open Library Foundation. I'm going to talk about the community. I'm going to talk a little bit about the software development project. I'm going to do a little who's who. And then we're going to go through all this other stuff. And then after some good to know stuff, we're going to talk about if you didn't know now you know. So you all may know that Folio is part of the Open Library Foundation. Folio was born in 2015. Originally, EBSCO, a group of our libraries called OLE and Index Data, sort of were in conversations and talked about sort of what the next thing could be, should be. All of the organizations had specific things that they wanted to try to accomplish. And so the partnership really ended up working for all of us. And the goal was definitely to create a vibrant community, a platform that lives on, is sustainable going forward. Innovation was a really big part of it. We wanted to make sure we weren't just rebuilding the latest ILSs, but something that's new and cool. Early on, people talked about sort of the iPhone or the mobile phone app store kind of concept. So the notion of apps that you could sort of replace as things changed was really key. So the OLF was founded in 2016, and it was basically created as a place to hold the IP of Folio. So it was really important that Folio is an open product, open source product, community owned, et cetera, was not owned by any single vendor. And the groups realized they needed a place for that, and there wasn't really a solid place. And so the OLF was created back then. And now, as you guys heard in the keynote or the opening, there are these projects that are part of OLF. So Folio was sort of the founding thing. There's Reshare, GoKB, OpenRS, ViewFind, ARC, LDP, and lately, or now, Koha. So I think pretty cool, 2016 to 2024, 8 years. a project a year. That's where, that's counting, right? Yeah, so there you go, project a year. All right, so our community. One of the things that I think is really cool about Folio is there's so many different types of people and organizations that are involved. So we have individual libraries, we have the German library networks or US consortia, and people in their perspective. We have librarians and vendors and developers and product owners and DevOps engineers and so forth. Sometimes a person is more than one of those, we can be a librarian and a developer or et cetera. Last time I counted, there was a way to count, and there were over 1,800 people on Folio Slack and more than 100 organizations represented, if you go by sort of email address domain. And that was 2 years ago, and kind of haven't gone back and counted, but that's a lot, I think. I mean, to me, it's a lot. So 2 years ago, if you scale that out based on the age of the project, so we have to be over 2,000. I'm not a marketing guy, so if I was a marketing guy, I probably would put over 2,000 just because, it's defendable. All right, Folio's governance model. But when Folio started, the governance model was the earliest people that were talking about Folio talked about a triad, those three organizations that I mentioned, EBSCO, OLE, and Index Data, sort of collectively governed and sort of they hashed things out. And as the community grew, it was realized that really isn't going to fly very much longer. And so we spent a lot of time, like I said, there's about 7 of us that were part of the group that sort of explored open source models and community models. We hired a consultant whose name was Johnny Bacon. Which was it wasn't like Guy Fieri, Johnny. It was Johnny Bacon was his real name apparently. And I apologize for the crappy humor, but it's all like that. But so we hired a consultant who gave us some thoughts and ideas. We certainly investigated what other organizations and open source groups had done, and we had some, vision for what we thought we wanted to become at the time, and so we tried to go from early on. Folio was really a pay for play, like the people who were the early contributors really wanted to make sure that they got what they wanted. And so the OLE libraries, things were very targeted around the functionality that they wanted, with not as much consideration for what is the general population going to want sort of down the road. And I'm contributing money. So back then, the people, the organizations that were part of it were definitely throwing a lot of money at it. And so I'm putting my money in, so I better get the thing that I want. So we transitioned in 2021, trying to think about, okay, well, that's not sustainable. And we want to come, we did some models, and, financially it wasn't sustainable, and just also the sort of the help for the community wasn't sustainable. So pivoted a little bit and came up with this concept of the 3 councils. So community council focused on the community health. They had to have a place for the fiscal responsibility to reside. And so community council made sense for there. And then also community council was the organization in Folio that sort of conducted the elections. Product council was the one consistent thing since the beginning of the project. There has been a product council really focused on product roadmap, what the functionality is going to be. Tech council, also very long in existence, developed and has had a consistent, I think, charter, which is basically dealing with sort of the technical standards. What are the best practices? What are the things that we will accept? What do we require for contributions? Those kinds of things, so that everybody can feel good about the code base and know that there's a certain level of quality built throughout. The way that the councils work and the governance model works is that individuals who are associated with member organizations are eligible to run for a council seat. So Folio has these organizations called members. Members pay some sort of dues. Typically that dues is funding. Sometimes that dues is in-kind contributions of people. But Folio has hard costs that it needs to deal with. It's got We have reference environments and developer environments and other things that are costing us money from like AWS, or we have test Rails licenses that we need to cover, or we have some other things that are just, money has to go out to some organization somewhere in the world. And so we need cash coming in. So membership was one of the, was the way that we had deal with that money, that funding. And so by virtue of having your organization contribute money to the Folio organization, you are able to have people in councils. So a little bit more about the member organization. I encourage you to go to www.folio.org. If you don't like it, you can blame me. That's another thing that I did was we did a rewrite of the folio.org website a couple of years ago. And so it, so I was involved in that. And like I said, you can blame me if I have any mistakes. So that's the idea here of the governance model is you have these three organizations all representing membership organizations, making decisions, helping steer the boat. I don't have slides on this, but it occurs to me that it makes sense to say, because I don't think I say it anywhere else. One thing that was originally the intent, I think, by the founding organizations, that people that had influence were giving money could drive what was developed. And, sometime between 2016 and 2024, that stopped being reality. So now the reality is that people or the organizations who drive who drive development are those that are funding the development. So EBSCO is providing the vast majority of developers, and they are funding those developers, and they are picking the things that they're going to develop based on opportunities and or their customers, which their customers and opportunities are sort of part of the community, which, that all ties together. Index data, same thing. We do development and we take work based on Folio organizations that need functionality. And so we build it. So really that's another big shift that's happened in Folio is early on, it was sort of, like I said, we're going to pay for the things that we want. And now there's a greater distance between I'm contributing money into the operation of Folio and I'm going to get specific functionality. Those are pretty far apart usually, unless you pay somebody to do your development. All righty. So back to another aspect of Folio's community, super, super important is Folio's special interest groups, SIGs. And so I just listed a few out here. A lot of these align with specific functionality that you can imagine, acquisitions or metadata management. Some of them are more birds of a feather sort of interest groups, consortia. I mean, consortia has functionality, but it's also sort of a type of organization, possibly. App interaction is an interesting one, where it's not worried about some specific area of Folio functionality, but really worried about consistency and compatibility across different apps and modules in the overall Folio ecosystem. We have sysops and reporting SIG is another one that I want to draw out as sort of a little different. So again, they're not sysops and reporting SIG aren't worried so much about functionality within Folio, but sort of they're dealing with the consequences of that functionality in Folio. So from a reporting standpoint, they're interested in making sure that whatever functionality is created, there's a reporting solution collaboratively that can address the new functionality, the new data. And sysops is all about operational things. How can we host, operate, upgrade, manage Folio? So these are some SIGs that if you are new to Folio, that you may be interested in. Typically, the PO, which is an acronym for product owner. Is everybody pretty familiar with what a product owner is? Anybody really not know? I can talk for like 15, 20 minutes on product owners. Okay. So product owners and dev teams are generally aligned with special interest groups. So, there's for each dev team, there's at least one PO, usually one, but sometimes more than one. And the product owners are representing specific functionality. And so they sort of tie well together with SIGs. And so if you're interested in understanding sort of what's happening with Folio in terms of development, then monitoring those SIGs are a good way to stay on top of that. And the reason I'm mentioning POs and dev teams is because there's not a direct line necessarily, but there's a good alignment there between what functionality is coming and what a PO might be thinking about and what a development team thinks about. You may not all be that close to it, but typically what ends up happening is the product owner and the SIG are thinking about and talking about things that aren't under development right now. And so they're thinking about things that are coming, and the development team is sort of working on what they thought about sort of let's just say last quarter. So SIGs and product owners are thinking about stuff in the quarter that ends in September. And the development teams are going to be working on them in October, November, December kind of thing, sort of generally. So staying plugged into SIGs and product owners are a good way to stay on top of stuff. Product owners have the pleasure of not only thinking about things that are coming, but they're also thinking about things that are still under development. Product owners, pretty tough job. And so they're not only working with SIGs to plan out what might happen in the future, but they're also answering questions for devs and going back to SIGs to confirm or clarify certain functionality because, we're also building stuff. So I love this slide. Folio is a really big project. And I use the word mature here. It's a very mature software project as well, in that it has a lot of these sort of quality metrics that are being tracked. So we have 381 repositories in the Folio GitHub. There are 442 GitHub members, which means people that have identified as wanting to be part of and view the project, not necessarily code contributors. We're at 2 releases a year. So I would say in 2018, 2019, I don't know if anybody else knows when the first A release was. It was maybe 2018, but anyway, we're popping out maybe 4 releases a year. And then we started to get overwhelmed with that. And so we cut down to 3. And then the Folio monolith got bigger and we had more stuff. And we're at 2 right now. And so it'll be interesting to see how long we stay at 2, given some of the new developments. There are 20, when you go to the Confluence page and you look it up, there are 20 less you, wherever that is. There are 22 teams with 29 product owners. So it's a pretty big project.
Mike, you're not
Yes.
sharing slides.
I'm sorry?
Can you share your slides?
Oh, no. I just hopped into, why didn't someone say something earlier? You must have been sending something in chat. We can't see the slides. I'm sorry. Geez, do you guys want me to start over? Okay, can you see it now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Apologies. Put that up there, see if I can operate this. Okay. Now to the who's who, I apologize for leaving anybody off. I wanted to strike the right balance of telling you names that I think you should know and names that I think are great to know and not to really overwhelm you. So we have 3 councils. We have 6 community, 6 co-chairs. Christopher Spalding from EBSCO is the new community council co-chair who took my place from Simeon. I'm no longer a chair. So that feels kind of weird. Product counselor, Alexis, Caitlin Stewart from Library of Congress. Tech counsel is Craig and Jen. Craig from EBSCO, Jen from Cornell. Kalila, if you don't know her, you should try to get to know her because she's a phenomenal person. I've worked with Kalila for a long time. I used to work for EBSCO. If anybody didn't know that. But great person, also lead PO, so really good at her job too. Alexei Petrenko is got kind of a thankless job as the release manager. So he's very involved in sort of what the plans are for the next release and sort of chasing people down and make sure that all of the Ts have been crossed and the Is have been dotted and the umlauts have been dotted. And so he's a good person to know, also makes himself very available, very, very responsive. We have a new person that's joined the community in the last 6 months, last 6 months. His name is Patrick Pace. He's our Folio developer advocate. So he's heavily involved in trying to document the needs of the community's developers and make sure that there are processes in place so that developers who have questions, or maybe developers that are onboarding, have sort of a place to go, reference material to work from. He's also going to be there to talk to them interactively as well. And then Peter Murray, who was actually the original person that was going to give this presentation, his wife had a conference to go to in South Africa last week. And so he figured he's going to go with that, go with her to that, and not come to London. And so good for Peter. Peter's phenomenal. He's been around since the beginning of Folio. He's the open source advocate for index data. He's a part of index data as well. But he is super helpful on all things related to Folio. And so he's a heck of a person to know as well. So Folio Slack. If you haven't joined it, I encourage you to join it. There's the URL for it. If you click on the channels button, link, whatever we call that nowadays thing, you get this little menu. I think it's really good to browse channels from time to time. So Folio generally creates open channels. You don't need permission to be joined. You don't need to be invited to join. But we also have channels that you might not be able to see because they're private, which makes sense. The community actually had some discussion about this early on with the new community council about, should we allow private channels at all? Aren't we an open community and blah, blah, blah. And everybody, the consensus was that, yeah, sometimes private channels make sense. You're starting something up. You don't know if it's good enough to open up to everyone else, or you don't want to contribute to the noise. So anyway, I encourage you to browse channels, and I am going to admit that I mark all as red a lot. So, I leverage Slack's capabilities to highlight when I'm named individually, when someone's at me. But I also like to be able to browse sometimes, but also I really appreciate the ability to say, just shut all that stuff off and pretend that I looked at it all. So I encourage everybody to do that. There are a couple of channels that I think are worth people considering watching if they're not already watching. The Release Bug Triage is a good channel because they're like the latest on what kind of bugs there are, and when people are asking for service packs or critical service patches, whatever the CSP thing means anymore. The council channels are a source of really good information. And then also, depending on your particular interest, I'm sure there are channels that you're going to want to plug into, whether it's functional or some other sort of group effort. Yeah, so exploring Slack is fun. Jira. How many people love Jira? All right, we have people who are raising their hand. All right, that's good. How many people love the new Jira versus the old Jira? Not as many people are raising their hands. Yeah, I'm getting used to it, like others are. Index Data went to the new Jira roughly the same time the Folio community did. And there's some stuff that I think is phenomenal, I guess. And I hadn't planned to talk about this, but since I'm excited, I will. So in Jira, when you do like a search, like filters, they call it filters instead of search. But anyway, when you do a filter, you can export that to Google Sheets like that. Or when you're looking at a result list, you can actually edit fields in the result list right there in the result list. So you don't have to like click on the issue, open it up in a new tab, click edit, blah, blah, blah. You can just right there, which I found that out like last week. So I'm still giddy over that. But there's so much information in Jira, and it's been customized incredibly over the years. And so there are standards that probably don't make sense anymore, but certainly there are standards that people rely on heavily. Bless you. And so we're using Jira in sort of the standard agile approach. And so we have some epics, and then we have some features, and then we have user stories, and those sort of imply scope and duration of development and so forth. So I encourage you to all explore Jira. There's tons of dashboards. So what I did here is I just brought up the dashboard screen and I searched for Quesnelia. And so you can see that there are a bunch of different dashboards that people have created, and you can tell that they're for different purposes. And so I think that's really cool, but I encourage you to hop into Jira. Go to Jira in order to get an account for the wiki as well, in case you didn't already know that. Yeah, hop in the pool. So projects of interest, in case you didn't know, UX pods are sort of the highest level features. Lots of times that's how ideas are first brought into the world of Jira. Each module has a project. There are some other things that also have projects. There's a FOLIO project, which I'm sure everybody knows what the FOLIO project is in Jira. It's DevOps work. So, I mean, it was like one of the first things that was created, and people didn't have the foresight to think, project is called FOLIO. Maybe FOLIO project in Jira is not as helpful as it might be, but that's okay. Yeah, it's been, like I said, highly customized, and I suggest exploring dashboards and filters. Okay. Folio Wiki, aka Confluence. So people, and others are going to probably use the word wiki and Confluence interchangeably. It's yep. So it's councils have pages, teams have pages, SIGs have pages, pages have pages. It's not curated, it's not pruned. There's a lot there. It can be pretty messy, and we've tried over time, we've tried to sort of make things be organized, and I'll speak from personal experience. Confluence has so many features that I get annoyed with and don't understand that are probably really good, but I don't, I don't know how to take advantage of them all. So there's this recently updated wiki page. There's widgets that you can plug in. And so again, I think it's pretty powerful. And does anyone use Confluence for their professional, outside of Folio? Yeah. And so is it I imagine it is actually, when you get to know it, it's pretty powerful and pretty cool, right? Yeah. Okay. So worth the time if you can, maybe. All right, so here are some things that are good to know, and I apologize for offending anybody by leaving them off, but index data and EBSCO have been around for a long time. We're two of the commercial vendors that are part of the scene. I think we both offer really good services, have really good people, and I think that it would be good to get to know one or both of us. So the German networks are a group of organizations that have banded together to help each other out, I think, and help the overall Folio community out. And so I just wanted to call them out here. I've listed sort of the key contacts / directors. I'm not sure what please don't show this slide yet. I have to fix that. But people that might be worth contacting. There's also a cohort of libraries called RLIF, which is an acronym that is something about academic research libraries that are engaged with Folio. Is that what the E is?
Exchange.
Folio,
I think.
Okay.
But yes, that's great.
Okay. Yeah. I like engage with Folio better than exchange. So if you could have that changed. And then some of the OGs. I mean, these are people that have been around the project since its inception, that really know, sort of almost anything that you could want to know about, and also why. I think which also can be very, very helpful. but we've got, University of Chicago, Cornell, Index Data and EBSCO and GBV out there. And there are, like I said, there are many other people that I could have listed, but I was in a time crunch, so I had to stop and with some of these. So if you didn't know, now you know. I got my comment in the wrong spot there. So if you want to know about general announcements and news, I think Slack is a really good place. If you want to know details about a specific feature, then Jira is definitely the place to look. All that detail is going to be there. If you want to know, for example, how the community funds are spent, you would go visit the community council and you would maybe have to look on some of the links on its on its Confluence page. You might have to look at some of its meeting notes. If you wanted to know what is FOLIO working on in the next sprint or the current sprint, you'd look at Jira. They have their Scrum board there. If you wanted to know who the PO is for the FOLIO team, you'd look at Confluence. If you want to know the agenda for the SIG meeting, you guys know how this works. I guess I don't have to read it all. Confluence. Basically, hopefully I've answered the questions about when you need to find out something about FOLIO. I've given you some tools and some areas to go. Why did FOLIO do it that way? So does anyone have any questions? Go ahead.
So, I'm Rebecca, I'm from Stanford. We implemented it a year ago, because everybody heard at one of our talks, but one of the values of moving, for all of us to move to a common platform is the ability to share between libraries. And that's, I've been grinding away at just the regular inventory control things that we need FOLIO to do, but this bigger picture of what a powerful community could be on a common platform, where is that discussion? Is that in Arliss, or where is the discussion about the greater good of a shared platform and the possibilities of that?
There was a session on that yesterday. No, I'm just kidding. No, there wasn't. One of the things that we did as part of the community council is in this WOLFcon, we created a meeting at WOLFcon for member organizations. And so if you recall back to the governance model, member organizations, organization that fork over dough, either cash or people, to contribute to FOLIO. And so the meeting that we had was, okay, we have these members that we've had for a while, like, can we get more? And why are organizations members, and what would it take for us to get more, to convince more? Maybe because there's, I don't know, 20-ish, 25 organizations that give $5,000 a year. And there's another, I'm making this up a little bit, but it's directionally okay. There's 10 organizations that give 20. And there's 3 organizations that give 50, and there's an organization that gives more than that. And so we're trying to figure out, we have some things that we want to do with community money. So how do we get more members? And so talking through that, one of the question, we had some dialogue, and some of the dialogue was about, it's valuable to be part of a community. Like, just being part of this community is valuable. And so how do we highlight that? But that was in the context of member organizations. And so I open up to the floor, general discussion about how can we help each other and how can we learn from each other.
Share with each other.
Right.
Like actual inventory, or, beyond just the rudimentary platform, how could we?
Yeah, I don't know. I guess I'm meandering around saying, I don't know where that discussion's happening. I can tell you that I'm involved with LDP, and the reporting SIG is one place where there's a lot of sharing of specific, tangible, this is my report, this is my query, this is how I unpack JSON, this is what I think of this tool. And so there's a lot of collaboration and sharing in that realm. But outside of it, I'm not aware, and so I'll open up to the audience.
You mean like items, like
Yeah, like.
you're at Stanford,
E-networked.
they're at Spokane,
Yeah.
you wanna
Yeah.
shift back and forth materials? I mean, I think that's more open RS or reshare or those types of conversations, like connecting the systems, not necessarily through folio at this stage, but I don't know, it might be interesting.
When we were promoting, you know, a new platform, the idea was, well, what would the power of a common platform shared by many libraries be able to do for us? And that was one of the things, and yet, since I joined the Folio community, I was like, where's that dialogue?
Yeah. I mean, even with like other ILSs, like you still have to have some sort of bridge between
Yeah,
systems, you know, so.
but Alma, for example, it seems just that there's more connection between Alma libraries and I just wanted that out there, that would be interesting if we could think about developing
Yeah,
that as a kind of a goal.
was Arlif, was that part of what Arlif was trying to do, is bring together some of the larger US academics?
Not for that purpose. I think there are other ways we're doing that. But I think if there was functionality that we wanted to have in Folio that would help that sort of, exchange, then Arliff might be a good place to do it because of the like-minded institutions, but it also might be limiting. Maybe if all the academic institutions are already doing this sort of stuff, maybe we want to branch out. So, yeah, I don't know.
It's happening serendipitously too. We go to WOLFcon, we meet Magnus. We're working on title level requests. He has a script, he sends it to us, we test it. Didn't necessarily do what we needed, but just person to person. That's why we're here, I think.
So a shift in topic, Mike, since you've been, you know where all the bodies are buried. Were there any decisions or processes at the beginning that the community were like, oh, that really, we've had to like go back a few steps in order to go forward because we made this decision? Or were there any apps that were abandoned early on? I'm thinking like Codex, we had an item app that was separate from instances at some point. Were there any things that
Yeah, so Codex is a good example of the initial vision. So I'll think of a couple things I can tell. So the initial vision was done iteratively, so it was super high concepts, and then we sort of get a little bit more detail. And one of those stages, someone thought, let's have search across everything, and let's be able to search every kind of record right from the get-go. Awesome. Okay, who wants to build that? And where does it stack in priority? Well, we got to be able to have bib data. You have to have items and holdings, and you have to be able to check stuff in and out, and we have to be able to buy stuff, and and pretty soon it's like we don't have any time to work on Codex. Codex was the name of the search capability that I'm referring to. And so we got enough momentum, and suddenly it's like, well, when's the last time we talked about Codex? Like a year ago. Well, what are we going to do about it? Nothing. And so we didn't do anything.
Yeah.
And so that's one of those, had an idea, did a little bit on it. Sometimes, you'll find you'll find a Codex page on Confluence, right? It's totally didn't happen. There have been some stops and starts with development teams, and which I'm not going to name, that started off implementing certain functionality, and then they just sort of, for one reason or another, fizzled out and didn't deliver that functionality, and Folio kept moving. I can't think of any sort of significant changes that were made, so we started on and going off in this direction and veered. So for example, one of the key things was making sure that Folio was not dependent on MARC, right? So that was from day one, that was one of the assumptions, and it still holds true. So that's a good one. Yeah, I guess I'm just, meandering here, so sorry about that, but the introduction of the Kafka message queue was, I think from a technical perspective, pretty important and maybe a little late. The earliest versions of data import, not that data import is like the shining beacon of success, but early on, it was really rough before it was, it implemented some specific handling of Kafka message queues that wasn't so great, so.
You mentioned the word priority, and I'm wondering how priorities are set, who sets them. And I also understand there's some kind of voting that happens, and if that's still the, how it's done, and if that is the most effective way of like.
Yeah, so
And what's the-
some history. Yeah, some history there. So if we roll back in time to 2018 and we're in Durham, North Carolina, where WOLFcon was in 2018 in April, or so April, May. That's what they did is all the libraries that were part of the FOLIO activity then, they voted. And so they had these Jira issues, these UX prods, and so they would vote. And so the Jira issues that had 47 votes was a higher priority than the one that got 13 votes. Over time, more organizations joined and were part of things. And so the voting was harder because they're, and harder to coordinate. And so people would mark things as go live, or what was the other term that we used? Not deal breaker. Showstopper. Yeah. So there was a showstopper tag that people checked off. And so you would look at all the ones that were showstoppers. And then we had a time where we had every university get its own priority. And so Chicago would have its field in Jira, and Cornell would have its field in Jira, and other libraries would have their field in Jira. It was like super messy. And then you fast forward to today, and EBSCO builds stuff and it has a way to prioritize, and Index Data builds stuff and it has a way to prioritize. And so individual organizations build stuff and they have a way to prioritize. And so there isn't any central ranking. There's no voting on features and functionality now. That's a relic of the past.
But there is the new process, the new prioritization process, which isn't really a prioritization process, but you can go into Jira and you can actually, this is something that was piloted by the acquisition SIG, and we're trying to roll it out a little bit more. You can actually go into individual Jira tickets and you can actually do a thumbs up on a particular ticket. And just to show the community, developers, whoever, that this is something that my institution wants. It doesn't mean it's gonna get done, but if a developer happens to have some time, they can pick it up. They know what most institutions are really interested in, and it would be easy for them to see something that they could maybe quickly pick up. So it's more like just an indication to developers potentially what folks want.
Yeah, and we about a year ago, I think the product council was doing a little soul searching, maybe a little bit more than that, on how they can best help the community understand what's being developed, and if they had some way to help prioritize things, like what exactly is that mechanism. And so one of the things that we did last year was the groups that were doing development. So EBSCO, Index Data, GBV sponsors a lot of development. Other organizations sponsor development, contribute a roadmap. And so Product Council was going to aggregate that roadmap and sort of publish it so that people could have one place to go to see these are the things that people are talking about being developed. And so it wasn't like a prioritization, but it was more of a notification of what the priorities were. And I'm not sure how that's playing out and if we're repeating that or not.
Yeah, no, it's ongoing, and there was a session yesterday on that, and so it might be something to watch the recording, that there's an update, and that's ongoing. That's become the roadmap.
Go ahead, Martina.
Just one thought,
is that like when we have a roadmap and see what is being done, then we can see as well what is not being done. And if people have like requirements and want to have something developed, then they maybe can, I don't know, fund development or find partners to fund development. So I think most important is that we make it obvious what is planned to be done and that groups can find themselves. Hopefully, maybe we can do something more to make it easier to find people who are as well interested in a specific feature, but yeah, we definitely have a roadmap at the moment.
So someone mentioned a recording, and I want to flip this over to our audience. This is something that I am embarrassed to say that I don't know how to find in Folio, but how do you find recordings from all of the meetings that we have? Is there a good way to do that?
It's in the drive, but. Yeah,
It's in the drive.
so. you go to-
It's in the cloud.
Yeah, you go to like the new member page, like, welcome new members, right? And then there's like a little paragraph that wanna find the recordings, and then it'll take you to the Google Drive.
So it's on
to
it's on the front page.
No, the answer is ask Peter Murray.
Yes, exactly.
I was doing more,
Yeah, no.
Teaching the
I know,
fish.
no, you would-
Somebody can put that link in the channel.
yeah.
Okay.
Oh, good, they,
recordings.openlibraryfoundation.org/OLF. Okay. But did you say that there's a link to that from the Confluence page?
Yeah.
Yeah, from
Okay.
Folio or
Yeah.
Mary page, the one you read it.
Ah,
And from your page.
yeah, okay, that makes sense. Okay. Are there, yes, go ahead.
Question about, are there agreements between the libraries developing Folio that they will always deposit features back into the general code, or is EBSCO, or is some code not being shared back with the community, and is there governance around that? Just wondering.
So, I can tell you that in our index data's dealings with organizations, many of them specify that the code must go back into the Folio repository. Not that we wouldn't already do it, but some people are explicitly doing that. As far as I know, EBSCO has contributed everything that they've developed. You know, either they plan to when it's ripe, or they already have contributed. I don't know if there's anything that you guys have.
Shanghai libraries contributed theirs back.
The Shanghai libraries have not contributed theirs back, and so they have effectively created a fork of Folio.
I think that was back in the D release, like Dahlia, right? What was the D release name?
Doggone it.
Yeah.
No.
But whatever that was, that's when they pulled.
it was a long time.
It was a long time ago. Yeah. And from what I understand of what the Shanghai Library did, they made some very dramatic changes that we probably wouldn't have accepted anyway. Like significant architectural changes that they made, but. So the other thing that I'll just say about code is that every developer that submits code has to acknowledge, it's called a CLA, which I am not going to be able to think of the acronym, but it's basically a contributor license agreement. I guess that is it. And so basically they acknowledge that the IP is owned by the OLF as they contribute code. So there's that.
And also I think tech council approved it, right?
Yeah.
So the governance is through tech council. Technical council?
Yeah, I mean, this has been in place even before the tech council.
Yeah.
That CLA agreement, but yeah.
Right.
But not everything that's developed locally at a library is
No, our
submitted to
friends
like the
that,
general release
no,
package.
like for example, our friends at Spokane Public Library did a lot of work on the SIP2 module to get themselves live.
Mhm.
And they didn't have the time to make it in line with other code that had been created in Folio. And so instead of contributing it back, they simply shared it. They shared it, but they didn't like formally contribute it back. And then what ended up happening is the functionality was built out in another project, considering all that code. And so it was sort of merged in, but not strictly speaking contributed. And so that's, I mean, that, and we had someone say in one of our meetings earlier that, if you guys remember, the opening session, Jesse saying we're in 6 continents and hopefully we'll have that library in Antarctica. You know, and so someone was saying, hey, this is open source, and so the library in Antarctica may have already implemented it and not told anybody. And so we won't know everybody that's created code around Folio, and they may or may not contributed. But, and we as a project would have no control over that. That's kind of what we want. That's part of our goal, is to let people take advantage of wherever they can.
But I think to follow up on the tech council point, if an organization wants to contribute code to the flower release, it does need to be reviewed by the town council. So there are standards that they need to review.
Yes, yeah, good point, yeah, there are certain gates that have to be passed through.
And the product council does ask to be informed about it functionality as well, which is, functionality is kind of this loose term, but
Right,
when in doubt, just let us know.
so Kimberly Smith, and I don't know where you're from, Kimberly, but I'm right with you. The courses app currently has no PO, so I mentioned we have all these POs. But we have some stuff that doesn't have a PO and also doesn't have a dedicated development team either, so. Just FYI, putting that out there for some karma, good vibes, and maybe something going.
Anyone interested?
That's an example of early on, this was the first example that I know of an institution essentially contracting for functionality. So this was we indexed data, built this for Simmons College, for Simmons University, and at the time, the courses was on the list of things to be developed. It was like number 312 of a long, of a 400 thing list. And so Simmons was like, hey, we can't go live unless we have this, so you guys are gonna have to build it for us, and so we did. But there's also no development team for it now. All right, so I don't know what time, we may be even gone a little over time, but
Very good.
any questions, any other questions or comments or stories? All right, thank you, appreciate it.